Okay, go ahead, Dave.
Right. So I believe we've gone over this before, that we have this demonstration TOM running, and so this is not necessarily the out-of-the-box TOM, but we like to leverage this to show a couple of the features and how one might choose to implement them if they want to do something specific to their TOM. So I'm going to highlight a couple of not necessarily small features, but quick things that don't require too much of a demonstration. So dead center, you can see that one of the things that we went ahead and demonstrated was how to write a custom form. You may all be familiar with a typical facility form, which is on its own page, and it's pretty static and everything. This is done with very minimal styling. That's actually mostly done with Python code. That just has an accordion concept. It was written as custom facility code. So I just took the existing LCO module and extended it and updated the form to be, a little bit more pertinent to what I wanted. And it even includes a little blurb with some information on how it was implemented. This is available at tom-demo.lco.global. So if you want to take a look to get an idea of this, maybe for inspiration or to learn a little bit more about it, then you can do so. So this is just one of the things that is obviously not in the base TOM toolkit, but that we created to hopefully serve as something informational or instructional for anyone who is looking to kind of upgrade the visuals or the user experience of their own TOM. So one of the second things I want to highlight here, and this is a very simple one, but we have a little template tag here for recent photometry. It's extremely simple. It's just for this particular target, the last 5 photometry points that have been added to it. And then we also have this this new feature, which is Finder Chart. And so what you can do is you can adjust the field of view, you can adjust the scale bar, you can adjust the units, and then you can save the image for submission with to a classical observatory. So this was implemented by our own Elizabeth Heinrich-Justies, and we think it's a very useful addition. Obviously, it's a little bit basic right now. As we start to add more support for classical facilities, we'd like to extend this functionality to be more integrated with the observation submission flow, but that's where it stands presently. So the first thing that I'm going to go over is the manual observation support. So we have an understanding that the TOM toolkit, in its, when we started, we were very focused on API-based observing, but obviously that's not the only area of how you submit observations in the astronomical world. So one thing we're working on is we're expanding our support for more classical observing. So we've taken the existing facility interface, and a few people on the call might be familiar with doing work with that facility interface, and we've separated it out a little bit, separated some of the functionality out into more robotic functionality and more classical functionality, so that we can start to add support for manual facilities, or people that have their own sort of submission flow for that can do so as well. So what we have here, this is also not out-of-the-box functionality necessarily, but it implements an interface that ships with the TOM toolkit. So we have this demonstration manual facility, and so this has just a more custom form that enables you to submit an observation. So by default, your basic classical observing form is really only going to have a name and then just a large text block to fill in a JSON set of parameters. We've taken that and implemented a small form which includes a few additional parameters that you might want in order to just keep track of any classical observing that you've been doing. So this is, just sort of our idea of what a form might look like. But if you have a facility that you're working with and you have a lot more specific parameters, then you can go ahead and implement your own form or your own version of that facility pretty easily in order to take advantage of this and start to really centralize your observing in one location. So I can go ahead here and make a test observation. And I'm just going to say that it happened last week. Nothing big here. A few exposures with a very brief exposure time, and I can include some notes and submit this. And so this isn't going anywhere. It's not being submitted to a facility or anything. It's simply being tracked in the TOM Toolkit now. And so what this allows you to do then is if you actually go and you look at your observation record, you can upload data that is associated with that observation. So to, again, keep everything centralized in one spot. If the observatory provides you with a tracking number, you can add that in. And so it's really just a good way to make sure that you're not fragmenting all of your observing in different places, and that this can continue to become more of a one-stop application for all of your observing. Are there any questions about this particular feature?
I have a quick question about this. Sorry if I'm behind. I haven't been keeping up with all the updates and TOM Toolkit and everything, but I want to understand the distinction between a observation and a request, I guess, if there is such a thing, if there is a difference. Because like the way I would imagine using this, I would think to myself, oh, I want to get an observation of this supernova at X telescope. And then, but like that observation night is sometime in the future. So I just want to have like a list of the things that I want to observe that night. And not all of those will actually get observed, but all translate into a data product. But does that make any sense? Like,
no, I think
how do you
I
envision using this?
So within the parlance of the TOM Toolkit, I mean, the object that tracks observations starting from when it's a request to when it's completed is called an observation record. And so in your particular case, there's no reason why you couldn't create observation records to track, oh, I want to observe this with this parameters roughly in this window, or I already observed this. Where, and unfortunately I can't very quickly demonstrate this, but where I think you would be able to leverage things then is you have a status field on all observation records. So you could, what you could do in your particular case is if you have a bunch of planned observations and you have your specific way of submitting things to a facility, or you know, you have a way that you want to save that data, you could implement your own version of that facility in code, and then you could set your own list of statuses that's available. So you could have a status that's simply planned or future, and then you could have a status that's completed. And so that would allow you to sort of slot that into your workflow. Does that kind of fit what you're looking for?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's exactly what I wanted to know. Thanks.
Perfect. Any other questions? All right, so let's move on a little bit. One thing that Rachel wanted me to go over, we might have touched on this in the last call, so stop me if you've heard this before, but we wanted to talk a little bit about observing strategies. And so an observing strategy, it's a little bit of a misnomer. It's more or less a template for observing. So I'm going to go ahead and open this elsewhere. So what I have here is, obviously you can see an empty list, and what I've done for that previous facility, and you saw that there were a number of different fields there, you know, name, observation ID, start, end, air mass, exposure parameters, and annotations. And I've implemented another form in my new custom facility, which is an observing strategy form. This is part of the interface, and you can see it's actually quite simple. There's not a whole lot that you need to put in. It wouldn't really necessarily make sense to include start and ends within this observing strategy because that's going to change. Ditto for annotations, you don't really want to pre-fill that, but if, say, you know that you're going to be making a number of observations that roughly have the same observation parameters, so you can create an observing strategy, and then you can leverage that when you're creating an observation. So if I go back to my target, what I can do is I can run an observing strategy, and I believe that we did talk about the cadence stuff previously. So I'm not going to address that right now, but with this observing strategy, then you saw when we clicked on the button, we just had an empty form. Now, when I run this test strategy, what I get is, and you know, it's simple, but what I do get is a few of the parameters filled in. Now, this is a very simple case. Once you start to get more complicated observations, and if you start to do things more programmatically, then this can really start to be leveraged if you have a lot of observations to really cut down on a lot of the extra legwork that you have to do to create things. So it's something that can be leveraged to streamline your observing. You know, you could update forms to apply your observing strategies immediately instead of having to do it yourself. You know, just things to reduce the number of clicks to really make things more efficient in your TOM. And one other area where this is helpful is that if you already have an existing observation and you want those parameters in a strategy, then you can simply use this button. This takes you to a new form for it, and we can rename this to test strategy 2. And now we have a second strategy with the parameters from that observation. So it really helps you skip a couple steps that would otherwise be repeated, and just try to streamline things a little better. Are there any questions about observing strategies?
Sorry, David.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned that you had talked about the cadence strategy. Can you say something about it, because I didn't know about it? Sorry.
Yeah, I believe that was discussed on the previous demo. Rachel, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that one was recorded as well.
Okay.
I believe so, yeah, and
Yeah.
I can make that recording available for you if you like.
Yes, because I did not prepare data for the cadence strategies, but I will talk about it briefly. So the concept of a cadence strategy, if I just head back to my target, is that well, there's sort of two cadence concepts. One is what we call proactive cadences. So this is done, for example, at LCO, you can submit with a period and a jitter, and a number of observations. And so it will try to take a series of observations within your observation window. And so it sort of plans that ahead of time. And the results of each exposure are not taken into account when it continues to take them. Cadence strategy is more of what we call a reactive cadence. And so what this does, and we have two that are built in. So what'll happen is when you create an observation, and this is mostly going to work at API-based facilities, but it can be managed to work more at classical facilities. It would take a little bit of work, but basically what happens is, just as an example with LCO, if you create one of these strategies, it's going to submit a single observation for, let's say, the resume cadence after failure strategy. So let's say you want an observation every 3 nights. And what'll happen is it'll take the observation, and if it's successful, then it runs a little bit of code to say, okay, it's successful. I want to submit another observation for 3 nights from now. And it'll keep doing that. But let's say one of those on that 3rd night that the observation isn't successful, it doesn't happen. So this program, which will be running on a cron job, will say, okay, that was a failed observation. I'm going to try to take this observation as soon as possible. So it's going to, instead of waiting 3 days, it's going to try to schedule it for the very next night. So it's a way of automating a series of observations, and it's backed by an interface that we created for implementation of your own cadence strategies. So if you have something a little bit more sophisticated that you want it to reevaluate what happened from an observation and then make decisions about what new observations to submit automatically, then you can write your own by implementing a couple of interface methods that we've created. That documentation is absolutely available. We can send it out in sort of a summary email after, which has become a little bit of a thing with us, just to make sure that everyone's on the same page with where this stuff is.
Can I ask something else?
I'm sorry?
Can I ask something else about, is there some strategy
ahead.
for filters? So let's say I want to observe a given object with all these many filters, and with this exposure times per filter. Is something like that planned or?
I'm sorry. Could you repeat that? Or Rachel, do you have an answer to that? Because I'm having a little trouble hearing.
Sorry, maybe it's my microphone. Yeah. So
Could you repeat? I didn't quite catch either. Sorry.
yeah. So if, for example, I want to submit a set of observations in different filters for a given object, is that possible, or do I have to go manually for every filter to create some template like that?
Did you hear this time, David?
Yeah, so
Shall I repeat?
correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, if a facility allows you to really, yeah, so if you're trying to submit an observation for multiple filters, you're going to be kind of limited by what the facility will let you do. So if the facility that you're trying to submit to allows you to submit observations with multiple filters at one time, then you simply need to update the facility module or request us to do so to do that submission properly. So it's going to be a limitation at the facility level. It's nothing technologically that can't be done in the TOM Toolkit. At present, I don't think we support that necessarily for any of our facilities, but again, that's it would require an update to the form and how it's submitted. It's not necessarily something that can't be done.
Thanks.
All right, so I believe there's one last thing that I'm planning on demonstrating. This one's a little nerve-wracking because I have demoed it once before and I completely screwed it up. So let's see how this goes. So one of the things that we introduced a couple of sprints ago is data permissions. And so I have 3 users prepared. And so what we've done is, out of the box, there's a setting in your TOM Toolkit that lets you choose which groups for which a target is visible. So this comes on every single form in your TOM, and it lets you decide who can see what. We have extended that functionality such that if you change a setting in your settings file, it will turn on permissions, group level permissions for observation records and data products, where previously, if you have that setting off, then if you can't see a target, you also can't see the data products or the observations. If you turn the setting on, then you can, for example, let everyone see a target, but only let some people see some of the data and some of the observations. And so I'm just going to give a brief demonstration on what that looks like. And so the first thing that you can see is that I have 2 groups in my TOM Toolkit. I have super users and I have regular users that I've created. And you may have noticed that on that target page, there was also a public group. So that comes by default with the TOM Toolkit with the library that we use for our permissions. That's not something that can be removed. That is simply for what's visible publicly, but no target or data product or observation has to be added to that group. So the other thing that I have here are 3 users. I have the admin, who is a super user and is going to be the one that can see everything in our example. I have guest, who is the one who can't see anything in our example. And I have average Joe, who is going to be able to see some things. And so in our groups, we have super users, which only has the admin in it. And we have regular users, which has the admin and average Joe in it. So I'm going to go back to my target. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to upload 2 files. One is going to be visible to both groups. So this is a light curve that I got from someone at LCO. And so if you'll give it a second to just upload and process. So now you can see I have this light curve here, and it's visible in theory to 2 groups. It's visible to both super users and regular users. And now I can upload another file. This is the light curve 2, and this is only going to be available to super users. So I upload that, and it's actually not visible because it's only 1 row from the same file. But sorry, let me just do this the other way. I knew that this was going to happen. We're going to make the little one visible to the average user and the big one visible to just the super user. All right, so I have all my data there, and now I can log out. And you can see, just to highlight this, now that I'm logged out, I previously had 5 targets that are visible. You can only see 3 or 2 right now. So I'm going to log in with Average Joe. Oops. And I'm going to click here. And even though I can see everything on my targets, I can only see that one row from the second light curve that I uploaded. And then to go even a step further, if I just log in as guest, I can't see anything, which kind of makes sense because that target isn't a member of that group. If I log in as the anonymous user, and it's a little strange that they have different permissions, this is something that you just kind of have to work through. There's no photometry visible for this target. So, so now just at the data point level, you can specify who can see things. And this also exists for observation records as well. So when you do submit an observation, and I'm gonna log in one more time, and you may have noticed this previously when I clicked on this, but you can see that you can select which groups this observation record is going to be visible to. So that's now available on targets, observations, and data products. At the moment, the setting is either you have it for targets or you have it for everything. One of the things that we're working to extend in the future is to set it on the model level so that you can say only observation records have these granular permissions or only data products have it. So just one more improvement that we made in the last couple of sprints that we hope can help to facilitate more of your development. So are there any questions about data permissions? All right, so one thing that I do want to highlight here is that the setting is documented, and it's something that you can turn on pretty easily. It's just changing a true to a false, I believe. However, if you already have some data in your TOM and you do enable the setting, it's going to require some programmatic scripts to be run to get your permissions up to date. So it doesn't retroactively apply permissions because it has no way of really knowing. So if that's something that people struggle with a little bit and they're interested in a sample script, that's something that we can create, or you can reach out to us and we can talk you through it. I would encourage you, if that's something that you are looking into doing, reading the documentation for Django Guardian, because that's the library that we're leveraging to do this. So Rachel, that's all that I believe we had to demo.
Thank you very much, David. And at this point, I'll throw it out for general questions. Has anyone got anything they wanted to raise?
This is Lindy. I had one comment about the demo is with respect to the manual observation facilities. This is sort of a solicitation to the group out there. David and I don't have the wherewithal to implement manual facilities for all the ones that might be parts of your program. And if you feel inclined to do so and then share that back with the community, we'd be delighted to take those pull requests, and contact us in the Slack channel if you want support for that activity. And
if I can just add on to this, we certainly don't have the bandwidth to do every facility, but right now we only have an interface, and we'd like to do a more concrete implementation. So if there's a facility that you would like to see, get in touch with us and we can talk about doing an implementation if that's not something you feel up to.
Are there any facilities that people would particularly like to see interfaces for?
I have
Maybe
a question, but general one.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Paul.
This is Paweł Zieliński. Hi, I have joined you a little bit late, so
No
my
worries.
question is very general. Where can we find a recording for this? Because I see it's recorded.
Yes, it is recorded, and I will be downloading this as soon as we finish. And the previous recording, I believe I posted it to our YouTube channel and linked it from the chat screen. But what I can do is also link it from the TOM Toolkit website, so it's easily accessible.
Okay, great, thanks.
So there was one other topic that I thought we really should touch on, and David, I'm sorry, I'm dropping you in this because I didn't mention this ahead of time. But the CIMA workshop that happened recently, this is the preparations for multi-messenger astronomy, which we are heavily involved in, and we think will probably intersect with a lot of TOM users and probably TOM development eventually. So David, did you want to speak to what we're involved with there?
Yeah. We're working under Andy Howell as the LCO representative on this project, and what we're focusing on is creating kind of an archive for all of the alerts that come through the SIMO broker. So we're looking to create a database to store all of these things for future reference if you want to go back and see them, or if you missed them, if you happen to subscribe to the stream, or if you don't want to subscribe to a Kafka stream because that's a little bit technologically difficult, and believe me, it is. We're also working on developing an easy to use front end for browsing those alerts, and as well as an API for accessing them. So a few different facets of that project, which is a very promising project for facilitating easier circulation of astronomical alerts, and of course there's talk about branching beyond astronomy as well. So a lot going on there, but keep your eyes out for our work in particular, which will be a largely front-end component and API for accessing these alerts.
Sorry, can I ask, this is in the context of Mars?
No, sorry. So the SIMO project is it's a multidisciplinary project that is building out infrastructure for more easily circulating science alerts in various fields. So at the moment, what they've done is they have a large-scale Kafka stream called Hopscotch, which is feeding alerts from GCN, ATEL, Swift, and they're looking to integrate more alerts to this Kafka stream. They're writing a client library so that you can easily, or more easily, subscribe to any of those, and also publish your own alerts to this large-scale data stream. And like I said, our component is to work on an archive, because those messages do expire, to work on an archive to go back and reference later, and also a front end and API component to browse the alerts without having to subscribe to a stream. So the stream enables you to, and the associated client enables you to receive real-time alerts from various sources, from other scientists, from these large-scale institutions. And then the API in the front end enable you to get more of a UX-driven interface into these alerts.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps I can mention that, I mean, we are doing something very similar, but for the CDF stream. So we have front-end APIs, clients, and the Alerce project. So perhaps we should, but this is a different topic.
Yeah, I think that is a different topic.
It's a different related topic. That's why I thought I'd mention it.
Yeah, and the leads on the project are Mario Jurek, and who formerly of ZTF, and Adam Brazier. So I would encourage you to get in touch with them. I know there's been a lot of interest in collaborations and such, so absolutely reach out to them.
Thanks.
So the other area of development that we touched on recently was the astrograph interface, which we've continued to work with the team over in University of Texas. And the team here practiced with the API that they already have, and we've sent them feedback, and we're working together to work towards an interface where you will be able to submit a pointing and a date range and a field of view, and then ask back for whatever satellite targets were passing through that field of view at the time. And the goal of this is to make it easier for all users to either identify after the fact what satellites were in their fields of view in order to exclude them as astronomical targets, but also to help with planning future observations. And we think that this is going to be an important capability, especially as Starlink and other operators launch more and more bright low Earth orbit satellites. So I just wanted to point out that that work is still going forward. Obviously, like everything else, it's been disrupted lately, but we are still pushing forward.
That's really good. It's something we were just looking at recently, looking at their API, and I mean, not trying to do it. We were just looking at what they already had and came to the conclusion that it was going to be hard. So we're very keen to hear that you're still working on that, and we would love to see the results. That sounds really good. Thanks.
Yes, it will be, and they are pressing forward with developing that in a way I think will be intuitive to most astronomers. And from our side, we're also looking at what we do when they tell us what's in a frame, visualization tools and planning tools that will go associated with that. So we'll keep you posted. And I see, thank you for those links to AlertSafe, Francisco. Does anyone else have any questions they wanted to raise? So usually around about this point, I think there aren't any questions, so I'll sign off and then somebody speaks.
Well, actually, Rachel, maybe I just somehow did not hear this. Did you talk about support in the Slack channel and potential private channels? I know that was something you wanted to touch on.
I did, yes, and I did touch on that early, but I'm aware that we've had several people join that more recently, so why don't I recap that? So we've had a number of questions come up, and we know that as you're developing with a new software package, particularly when you're deploying that package to a public server rather than just your local machine, we know questions come up, and we wanted to encourage everybody to make copious use of the TOM Slack channel to send us questions or comments at any time, so that we can help you keep moving as soon as possible. And I will post again in case it didn't stay on the Slack channel. This is the link to go to if you haven't joined the TOM Slack channel already. If you prefer a private channel for your team, we can totally happy to set that up for you. And we've also organized direct one-to-one telecons to work with a number of the teams to help them get their project online, particularly as you come up to deployment, because we realize that's quite a tricky space. So please reach out to us anytime you have a question. Okay then, if there are no further questions, obviously you can reach us on Slack at any time, but I will just wrap up by saying thank you very much to David for the presentations, and thank you all for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you.